Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks to everyone who is here for this next demo, which is called REDCapSync and RosyREDCap 2 development R packages using the REDCap API for standardized data pipelines and exploratory data analysis. And we are happy to have here Brandon Rose from the University of Miami and Jackson Memorial Hospital. So thank you, Brandon, and please take it from here.
Thanks so much. As open, if you have a question that's relevant, feel free to interrupt. I'm going to try and lay some groundwork quickly, and then I'm going to do bulk of my talk as a demo, which, as you know, live demos can be, real. So we'll handle that as we go, and I'll show you more. I want you to pay attention more to the framework and the ideas than necessary. I'll explain the coding as people are interested. I'm assuming most of the audience, are how to install things, and then, um, I really recommend one day making your own package. I've learned a lot turning what used to be the mindset of having scripts into having functions and packages. I learned a lot along the way. So let me share my screen and hit my start. All right. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see the title screen here. Um, I'm really into this idea of a model view controller framework. It's used for software, websites and things where maybe you write a bunch of functions that deal with the logic of your application, a bunch of functions that deal with the view, maybe a bunch of functions that deal with adding, editing, removing data, and you kind of keep those separated so that the person um, actually interacting with the data, there's kind of a structure to it. It makes the coding easier, but I also use the term a little more loosely, where I say a model is your database, controller is kind of how you manipulate that data, and then a view is whatever analysis statistics. Um, and I'll come back to that concept throughout the talk. Um, I wanted to share something. I know it's 5:30, so I think it's funny. I will spend a weekend or a year or, all this time working on things just to make things a little bit faster. So this process of automating things from REDCap kind of came from that impulse. And so that's why I included this. I also found this on Twitter yesterday about how you plan for a talk and then it kind of goes off the rails. I'll try and not do that, but I did want to preface, that I'm currently in the ICU shift right now. I took an hour off. It's a lot to put your thoughts on paper, and this is a development package that I've been working on for about 4 years overall. I just didn't know all of it was turned into this package. So the moral of the story there is I put a Google Forms link that is, if you just go to the codingdocs.com, the actual link, so you don't have to type it, you just click on that. That's for when I release this with its like final names and function names. So if you happen to be following and actually installing the package, just keep in mind the function names may change. I might delete things so that I can get onto CRAN, those kind of things. And then the quick overview of the talk, as I promised from that meme. Introduction, which we're doing now, kind of a quick motivation about my work with sarcoma and other cancer-related projects. And then kind of a quick boom, boom, boom for model view controller and what I use R and REDCap for and how it fits into the idea of data pipelines. And then most of it's demo, which the time is 35. So I'd like to get to that, um, in the next 5-10 minutes and just show you actually what the R package does. And then we can also open up for discussion. Quick introduction about myself. Right now, I got accepted to be a hematology oncology fellow at UT Southwestern. And I also, all this coding stuff and a bunch of other things led me to clinical informatics fellowship, which are those people that work with the EMR and workflows and operations. So a lot of this, the skills that you guys are building in data can apply to the admissions committee like I did, or cancer research or operations for a business. It's endless. So that's why I like all the things that R has taught me. Um, so this is just a brief horrendous slide with tons of colors. But this is kind of like things that I'm really proud of that I've done in R, circus plots, NGS work, cancer data, admissions committee data, like viewing maps about where their parents went to schools, heat maps and things. And then in the bottom right, teaching a little bit of R, which I would like to do if I have time next year. Very similar structure, which I included here. I had given a bunch of talks a year and a half ago, I think, on introduction to R, and then data analysis, REDCap, and R integration, which is kind of my sweet spot now that I'm focusing on, and then putting it all together for data pipelines. So that's kind of where this talk started developing and where the packages went. I just included this because of my cancer focus. I really like the idea of data harmonization, where, there's a high quality of data that's been pulled from multiple sources. And I just like that people that work with R, they get their hands dirty and they understand the benefit of merging data from different sources. And so I included this from another talk. I wanted to introduce this, especially for this audience. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Gollum effect. This is not like Golem, but like Gollum, like the Lord of the Rings, it's mine. This is the idea that probably have all experienced it in some way or another where somebody wants their own project. And I think when you're used to working with the data, you know how annoying and harmful that is because access to data, growing the data set over time, all of those things are critical to really have 500 patients, 1,000 patients, 2,000 patients. And you can't really perform high level research without sharing data. Just you can do one little thing that's yours, but that's not the same. So that really demonstrates in a nutshell what I did with the sarcoma group, merging data from different people and saying, hey, we're going to use the REDCap now. And that all turned into this pan-sarcoma database. So I actually started from the end product and then I turned all of that code into the thing that I'm presenting today. So it started off as a shiny dashboard built on REDCap, and then someone wanted me to do it for another project, and so I generalized it and said, what if I had 10 projects? What if I had, what if I want to click between them and I have them all on my computer and I want to click through? So that's what RosyREDCap is. I presented that at R Medicine last year. And then I further broke that up into two R packages. One is a more CRAN, likely to be approved by CRAN package that just does all of the API wrapping, which I'll talk about the REDCap API. And then RosyREDCap is more of a maybe GitHub for now, like plug in to those objects that are made by REDCapSync. A lot of you would be familiar with this. This is just to give you another thing to look at as far as I think it's really important, regardless of if you use REDCap or not, to have a clean system or a way of doing things. A lot of you will recognize the tidy transform, communicate, the tidy framework. And this is just a demonstration of, maybe you take that script and turn it into a package. Maybe you put that package on GitHub, formalize your data sources, things like that. And then this is just, again, explaining that I took multiple projects and I said, how can I separate this? And I used this model controller view, model controller view framework to kind of make myself a little bit sane. And I also wanted to share this as a thing I think you all should do too. If you're working on projects that are very niche about a certain thing, whatever that project is for you, see if you can pull out generalizable things from there. And even if somebody's made things like that, consider sharing your work. That's kind of what I did here. This is again just summarizing. Model is your metadata and your data structure and where your data is coming from. Sometimes it's from one place or multiple places. In this context, REDCap is great for that because it has metadata, it's locked down on a server, and you can use that metadata for plotting and things, which is why it fits well into this framework. And then the logo here that doesn't have writing, that's actually the REDCap R package, which I used to write my own API code, but I decided REDCapSync is not an API package. There's like a million of those, and I'll show a table of that. This is a REDCap API kind of wrapper with REDCap R doing some of the API calls, but ultimately the end product being a list object that you can use for functions. for RosyREDCap. This is again just summarizing that I split what was RosyREDCap doing all these, and I said, okay, here's REDCapSync. It's going to do the API stuff. It's going to go get the log, something that makes it unique. If any, I don't know how many people in this talk actually have downloaded multiple REDCap API packages. I imagine some of you have because you're at this talk, but there are at least 7 that I can think of REDCap API packages that go and get data from REDCap. The issue is you have to spend months, years learning, okay, I'm going to go get the metadata. Now I'm going to get the data. Now I'm going to merge these things together to do a plot. And now here's my script. And oh, now I have another project. And so I wanted to generalize all these things. So the other thing I do for the sarcoma group is I dump these files. I'm just going to check the chat real quick while we're here. Make sure we're on topic and on time. So far, so good. So yes, in summary, some people that you guys all know these people that have Excel sheets, and they use that as their model. They use that as their controller. There's derived data in there. There's another tab. Maybe there's hidden columns, hidden rows. Maybe they're awesome and they know SPSS and SAS, and their only goal is to get that Excel sheet working in there. And then you can see the benefit of working with keeping your data where it belongs, learning a coding language, having a either commercial or widely available viewing, way of working with the data. And then the thing on the right is a little just the pansarcoma database. So I'll skip over that for now. And then I just wanted to demonstrate the power of having a data pipeline. So this is just an email that I received from a mentor, and they said, hey, all that analysis you spent that time doing, could you actually redo it and, send it to me with only the localized people? And the whole reason I spent my time making REDCapSync and making RosyREDCap was so that I could add something like, okay, only the metastatic people from this REDCap, run the data again, make the survival curve. And it took me 4 minutes, but like the thing in the beginning, I spent all this time making something just to make this analysis a little bit faster. But I'm hoping that what I've learned can be generalized to help other people as well. This is more for reference. These slides will be available, but this is just things that I've developed over time about how I see research um, as a circular, sorry, how I see research as a circular thing. And if you have an Excel sheet and you do one project and it's your project, it's kind of a flat line. But if you work in a group and you have REDCap and you have Epic and you have scripts and you're all working together and you're doing data quality, then by the time you come back around, you have another project. That data is already lined up. It just needs to be refreshed. And that goes into different ideas in data science about refreshability and interoperability, and that's all the stuff on the bottom left. All right, and the last thing for the background that I'll report is kind of what many of you may know is like this transactional data. Long is a word that people use, or relational. That's how the data that's stored in Epic and where every row might be a lab or an NGS report. And analytical data might be what people are used to, these Excel sheets that are really wide. But I think for both analysis and collection, the transactional, even though we call it transactional data, when you go and actually do the R coding, that long data is what you're after, especially in my context with oncology, where it's event-based and the dates matter. And so you don't need them in different columns, you need them in different rows. So I'm done here. I'll skip over for time. This idea goes back to the model view controller. I think all of you should, if you're in a multi-user thing, you should develop at least a basic governance strategy. Who does the data belong to? How are they going to access it? How are we going to analyze it? What's the worst that could happen if this Excel sheet with all these MRNs gets emailed to the wrong person? That kind of stuff. This is my summary of REDCap. Sorry, it got cut off on the bottom. I don't know how many people here are REDCap people. I'm just going to assume many of you are. I just wanted to summarize more formally the data structure of REDCap. Every institution has their own server with a version, and then every project has an ID. And then if it's a classic REDCap, every record belongs to the project, and then it's just instruments belong to records, and every field is a unique variable name that belongs to an instrument that can repeat or not repeat. And then if you have arms and events, it adds another layer of complexity to the data structure. So I wanted a package that just whatever the structure was, it pulled the metadata, pulled the data, and it exported it. If anyone's exported data the raw way in REDCap, you'll know if you have repeating instruments, the REDCap way of viewing the data, the reports is very clunky, and it has one row for the things that don't repeat, and then you scroll all the way over for the columns that repeat. And then those, if there's three of those, it's so you have to know to code to kind of separate those things. And the REDCapSync that I have does that automatically. I'll leave this for reference. This is for the people that are going to keep using Excel, and kind of an explanation of if you're going to do Excel, at least establish, if you have maybe work with a collaborator that's going to use Excel, don't let them hide rows and things like that. Don't let them use colors because you can't get that out of the file, things like that. And in general, I think I upset people last year when I showed this. I don't think feel as strongly as I think Excel's cool. You can do a lot in Excel. You can do Python stuff in Excel. You have all these Power BI things that might rely on Excel. But if I'm being dramatic, learn a coding language, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I will skip over the rest and go back to um, what REDCapSync is. So essentially everything here, um, I have 16 REDCaps. Some of them are test projects, some of them are real research. I don't want all of them to refresh every time I run the API code. Maybe some of them I only want to refresh weekly. Some of them I want to refresh daily. So when I run the REDCapSync sync function, for the projects that have already been set up, and the tokens that are stored in the environment, you run sync and it'll go project by project. And the unique thing about REDCap sync is it will go to the log, the REDCap log. It'll look at the interim between when you last refreshed and now, and it will grab the records that have been modified since that point, and it'll overwrite that in that object that you have. So if you have a 10,000 person REDCap and you have this workflow and 5 records have changed, it will refresh those 5 records. I know other people are probably working on something similar. Um, but as I said from the beginning, I think my goal was to have a function that was like sync project or update project where you already have the data and it just refreshes it. It does all of this by maintaining a cache of projects. I use the hoarder package to do that. And then whenever a refresh is run, it'll load the project. And this for me has worked with a 30,000 record REDCap, especially when only 1 or 2 records are being updated. And then there's also a set of functions that dump out these files that are in the middle of the thing here, with each form as well as the code book. And those things can be used to upload back to REDCap. Um, the thing on the right, I think, as I've been thinking about this package more and more, I'm actually kind of proud of a unique version of this log processing function. So if the REDCap sync package goes and gets all of the records, you can also analyze that log with a function. And what you'll see on the far right here is all of the people that have interacted with the sarcoma research database. I think this could be very useful to people that might want to track that kind of information. Maybe you have a REDCap with 10 people and you want to know how many records that person has interacted with or added data to. So that's something that's built into the log summary function automatically. And I can talk about that for those that are um, particularly interested. So now I'm going to take a 1 or 2 minute break for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up my demo. And I'm done with like all the slides for the most part. So for anyone here who has specific questions before I show and tell, I did the opposite. I told first. I'll do the show next. So if anyone has questions, please either chat or speak up. I'm just pulling up my environment over here. Looks pretty good. All right, I could be one of those people and just demand at least one question. And for the most part, right now I'm just showing REDCap sync, but I'll show you the RosyREDCap stuff as well. I lost my Zoom. Here it is. Okay. I see one chat. Just a smiley. Okay. I wish I prepared like a poll too to ask how many people do. So looks like we're not, we're about halfway through, which is where I wanted to be for this demo. All right. Back to sharing. Okay. If you see any tokens on here, it's only going to be from test project anyway. Is my screen viewable?
Yes,
Looks
we
a
see
little,
it.
yeah, it's a little
Great.
small though, for me at least. I don't know if you can
Yeah, I'm gonna
increase the
try.
font a little.
Yes, happy to. I'm gonna probably hide most of my environment anyway. It's not relevant. Same with over here. Let's make it a little smaller. Okay. So I will start with something that's a structure. So if you wanted to install this project, if you haven't used remotes before, you could either use remotes or pack, PAK. But I use the remotes. I got an error once with the pack one, so I've just been using remotes. So you install it with the codingdocs.coms or codingdocs/REDCapSync. And then if you've never installed a package from GitHub before, essentially it's going to be on your computer like a regular package. It just the source was from GitHub. And then when it's on CRAN, that's when you can do install packages, REDCap sync, which I'm working on. So the main function here is get projects, shows you the projects that you've already loaded up. So I'm just grabbing a couple columns from here. So these are all of the REDCaps that I'm a part of at the moment. And this is stored as kind of a data frame in your cache. And there's nothing stored in your cache that has a REDCap API token. The only thing that's stored is the directory path of where it is on your computer if you chose that, which is I recommend the directory path being chosen because that's where the log is stored and things. So the only place that actual data is stored for the user that besides the project ID and the name of the token, but not the token, the only thing that's saved as data is in a user-defined directory. So for this case, I'm just going to pick a random REDCap name. I'll pick one that has a good structure like the neuroendocrine one. I will just call it that. So I have a REDCap. I chose the name myself. They have to all be short environment-like names, or they can have underscores and numbers, things like that. So you choose a short name, which I'll show you the setup later. I'm kind of doing the show and tell part first. The reason I made this is I can load a local version of this REDCap project, and I can use that project object to do whatever visual I want. This visual comes from the RosyREDCap side, where I'm using the REDCap sync stuff to visualize as a pipeline. And this is all from, I know that it's zoomed in. This is a visualization of the REDCap data structure. The yellow is the events. So I have a neuroendocrine form, and then I have systemic surgery radiation. I have a couple of parameters, a lot of parameters in this function actually that demonstrate this is from the Viz network package for those who haven't used it before. I think it's a really fun package that does the network diagrams. And then I've also built this into a Shiny app where you can choose the project. And there's different settings. I have a vignette on the coding docs under the R section, but you can use different ways of visualizing the REDCap data structure this way. This was more of a proof of concept and to show that you can do this, but there's other applications to this. If you've ever worked with Plotly or things, you know, you can edit the data that's in these hoverovers. And I'll show you, you can toggle here between. So let me back up to just the REDCap sync. Like how would you actually get your REDCap running um, in your environment? So I'm gonna gloss over how you do the tokens because I have a link for that about how you manage things in your environment. Um, Once again, you install the packages if you don't have them. This is just so that we can see what projects I have. But if any of you have ever, I wish I could do a show of hands. Um, I'm gonna just guess that maybe half of you or a third of you are used to using system get environment, get something from your like this is a good way to store tokens. Basically, you can use the package use this and edit our environment. And this, I have an article for this, but it's a straightforward thing. This will pull up your version of the file on your computer and it's separate from whatever directory or GitHub, wherever you're at. It's kind of stored at the higher level of your computer as a text file. And then you would just put something like REDCapSync test like the API token is G whatever it is, and you put that in that file. And I kind of did that as a choice because I don't want to be responsible for people with scripts and tokens. So I really built this package to be setting the token outside of the test environment. The only thing you need to do is this test email is the name of my project. The only requirement is you just name the token REDCap sync underscore the same thing as the test email. And then this is how you reference an internal function, which I learned from, making my own package. But I have a, true false, is this a valid REDCap token? So I won't show you my fake token for this fake project, but it's an actual valid REDCap token. Then I'm going to try and show my desktop here. Can you guys see my desktop on these files here? R objects, REDCap scripts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to pretend like this is your working directory. I don't recommend using your desktop as your working directory, but just for visual purposes, when you choose the working directory, which I have chosen, the only thing that this package needs to work is the short name that you want to use for REDCap for the project. I have the Pansarcoma database, so I just call it PSDB. That's my short name, and that's how REDCap Sync knows, hey, load PSDB. And so that's how it references everything. What you're going to put is your REDCap base. If you guys have done these API packages, you'll probably recognize this is normally API. It normally has API at the end. So I might use that structure in the future, but right now I use that link to generate things. So for now, it's just the regular REDCap page. I'm assuming that most REDCaps reference /API, but if I'm wrong, I'll change that in the future. And then you specify your directory path. This project it'll still go get everything from REDCap if you don't give a directory path, but if you want um, the syncing functionality to work, then you have to specify a directory. So this is a two-part process. You just run setup project. And normally, if you want to set up 10 projects at once, this just returns a invisible object. And you could set up 10 projects with one script and then separately run sync. And the cache will go to the directory, sync the REDCap. But if you wanted to return that same object so that you could run the sync, that's how I've done it. So you saw before, I don't know if you saw, I had deleted all these files, regenerated. So once you pick a directory, it'll drop input, output, R objects, REDCap, and scripts folder. And this is a development project. I can always change that, but that's just how the current setup is. When you run sync project, this is the actual demo. So when you run sync projects, I'll describe what's going on. It's going to test the REDCap, know what version we're talking about. See connected to REDCap. Now this is using the REDCap R package to go get the metadata. It's not going to get the metadata every single time. It's going to get it for new projects. And then once it has the metadata, it's going to get the data. If this was an existing project, I'll show you. I think I have REDCap pulled up here. I'll change one record and I'll run sync again and I'll show you. But in addition to going and getting all this data from this project, it's also saving Excel sheets in two different places as a default, which can be changed. The main way of viewing them is in the REDCap folder. There's going to be a folder that has the same name as the name that you chose, just in case you wanted to use the same directory for 5 REDCaps. And then in that folder is going to be a form name for every instrument, and then also the metadata, which I used to put in a different folder and I could go back to. But this will have the users, the choices, like the data dictionary, that kind of stuff, as well as the raw data. So I think here I have these are fake names, demographics that I used a test project to. And then this is the uncoded data from REDCap, which I think is very important. So if this doesn't have any male, females, multiple choice, but if you've ever tried to use the data import tool in REDCap, it only wants the 1 and the 0, the male, female as a coded data set. The other reason I made this is I have functions in here that convert the REDCap coded data to the uncoded data and back and forth. The only time that's ever going to fail is REDCap doesn't specifically prevent you from saying 1 is male and 2 is male and 3 is male. For whatever reason, that's allowed. I have a warning that throws when you do that. So that's the only time I prefer to see data in its uncoded format. It's a way better way for the collectors that are looking at the data, and it also prevents mistakes from people. Oh, what's alive again? Okay, that's 4. Yeah, so I really don't recommend for the data collectors to be using coded messages. I think that should be just handled on the statistics side. So I said that was the one place that it dumped, just the raw REDCap, nothing changed. But then I have this multiple in the output folder. There's a REDCapSync file that has not just the data that's in this REDCap, but it also has annotated forms, annotated fields. So if you were to scroll over, it would tell you the completion of the data, the stuff you might have seen with Murphy, something like that. How many are missing? All of that's over off to the right. I had mentioned choices. I don't know if I mentioned choices. Every row is a choice in the REDCap if it's a multiple choice. And then if you scrolled over, it's giving you the basic, 235 out of 998 in the data set are, Mr. in the salutations that I generated. Um, and that is the same no matter how many variables you have in the REDCap. This stuff is there if you want to look it up. And then this doesn't have the user summary, but I'll show you another example of that. We're doing good on time. So that's how the export works. And now I'm just going to pop up REDCap. Any questions so far? All right, I'm just going to keep showing and telling then. So that was the sync project function. I don't want to go back and forth between too many screens. But if I were to change one record in the REDCap and run sync again, right now it's going to tell me, you've already run this day. You wanted to do it daily, which is one of the parameters in setup project. You just say whether you want it daily, weekly, monthly. It already knows the last time you did it. It said, I'm not going to talk to REDCap again because we've already done that today. And we've already transformed things the way you've wanted, and we saved it to the directory. So I showed you those things. And then I think the other most interesting part, I have this function called generate project summary, and this is going to take the data that's in REDCap, and if you wanted to choose a subset, um, in this example, it's just the REDCap sync and drop it into the environment. If you were to do that, it transforms. If you have repeating instruments, it puts them all in one single one single area. And now, so if you just ran all of this for your REDCap project, you would have a merge data form and maybe a couple other forms that weren't that if you have repeating things, and you would have, REDCap, your REDCap dumped into your environment. I'm using this is forbidden by CRAN to put things in your global environment, but it's fine in scripts. This is just taking that list object and dumping it into the environment. And then if you have a workflow where you're used to, running the same thing over and over, it's going to get the new records, dump it into your environment, and then you can do whatever coding you're used to doing. So I have this RosyREDCap function for making parallel category diagrams or parcats from Plotly. I use this a lot in research. Um, I wish I wanted to just grab salutations, but I don't know if you've seen things like this. I have a better version, so I'm going to skip this for now. That's the two of the three things I wanted to show. The last one is a actual real world example of sarcoma, and then I'll show you the RosyREDCap Shiny application. But this is the actual sarcoma data from our project where we load our development packages. This time we're only going to load the pansarcoma database, which is a REDCap project. I'm not going to sync it. We can try. I don't because I don't have the token stored in my environment. I deleted it so that it wouldn't be part of this demo. But the sync would work if everything was set up. And then this is kind of we've done the beginner stuff, but now this is like an intermediate thing. Let's say you wanted to get that data from REDCap, you wanted to transform it in a certain way, like merge things together. You wanted to exclude anything in the REDCap that counts as an identifier, which you have to specify in REDCap itself. And I won't show you how to do that, but you could just choose yes, no, this variable's a identifier. And then this function will take something like, if you know the raw name of the REDCap field, I want leiomyosarcoma. I have an operator, either and or, and then I only want the metastatic people. And if you ran that filter, you could either create a summary where this goes to an Excel file and you don't deal with it in R, and that's part of the sync process. But if you just wanted to generate it in your environment, you can actually drill into the function that generate project summary. It can completely work with just project and the summary name if you've already set up one. But if you don't provide that, you can just manually generate these things. This is something I've always wanted with the REDCap projects I'm doing, is to generate a subset. Um, and the reason I do this and not dplyr and filter is because I'm retaining all the metadata. Everything's labeled because when I do something like a survival curve, which is what this 40 or so line script does, I can generate like a survival curve for a certain subset. And then this is all from the REDCap, if somebody edits the data that this is derived from, or if I just wanted to do some exploratory data analysis and say, okay, that was the metastatic people. Now I want to see this for the non-metastatic people and run the same set of functions. Even though this looks like, you did all of this work was done on the coding, this is all REDCapSync. A couple of hacky things I did just to make sure I had the right columns for this survival curve because it's a little more custom than like a parallel category. And then make survival is just a function in the RosyREDCap package. It uses the serve miner package that some of you might be familiar with, and you just have to tell it the start date, the start column, the end column, and more importantly, the stratifying column. If you want to split this by birth, sex, or another variable, um, then you can do it that way. And you can either do it as a script like this is being shown, or you can do it in a Shiny app, which is going to be the final thing I show. So we're doing really good on time. The only thing I'm going to show next is the Shiny app, and then I'm just going to kind of recap. And if you guys get 5 minutes left at the end, we can discuss some things. or people can head out early. So the final thing will be the Shiny app. Um, any questions? There's a lot that I can't share, but I will also volunteer myself if there's anybody in this Zoom meeting or watching remotely that wants kind of a more, hey, show me how this would work for my project kind of demo. Maybe I can help people with those kind of things. I'm looking to kind of sell myself as a REDCap expert and provide help to the community. So if you guys have specific questions about your project or how you might do something like this, I'm happy to help as a way of testing my package. I'm just going to check the chat. Anyone have a question verbally? And then we'll finish with the Shiny app. Nothing in the chat. It's not Friday, so I know people aren't headed to happy hour. Do you guys think this is like good for the audience that's here? Am I over explaining things, under explaining things?
Seems good to me.
Great. All right, so I'll just show the Shiny app and then I'll wrap up here. So in the RosyREDCap package, there's a couple of functions that do standard functions. The main one I showed off was the REDCap diagram one, which shows the metadata. Um, but this is really the end all be. This is why I made the thing here was for this. So these are all of the real projects. It's just the names that are showing. Actually, everything on here is using the REDCap, the cache that's from REDCapSync, and it's saying, hey, which projects have you set up? Where are they in your directory? All of that's kind of behind the scenes here. I'll switch to the test email just to keep things good for a second. Then there's a couple of different tabs. So one is just the project tab where you could this is the reason we build things in layers in application is you have the REDCap sync that gets all the data. Now you know what they all are. Now you have kind of a bunch of functions that make different. You could also apply this to statistics. This is mostly visuals, but you could also build this into, doing stats as well, which I'm trying to build into here. So this is just a demonstration that I can toggle through all the different projects I have in my directory. And even the really big projects, they don't take a very long time to load. And if I wanted to play around with the different things of this function, then I can do so in this Shiny app. Let's see. And this is just a way of demonstrating for those of you that are ready to take the leap that if you're only working with scripts, this is kind of what you get out of doing functions. And the way I'm demonstrating all this, all you need is an API token to set up things properly. And then you could just run something like run RosyREDCap, the Shiny app. And even if you didn't know all the stuff I'm explaining, you'd still be able to kind of flip through your projects if you set them up the right way. The other reason I made this is now once we have the project selected, now we're going to do exploratory data analysis. So if you go to the data tab and you choose um, one of the REDCap forms and, say I'm going to look at the demographics form or, merge them all together. This is nothing, none of this is, what's the word? Customly input. If you have a multiple choice question in the REDCap, it knows what it is. And it says, hey, I know you have the salutations where you ask people what their salutation is. I broke that up into the choices. And if you just want to look at the people that said doctor, and then visualize them, then we can do that. So I'm just going to choose the people that have said that they're doctor in this fake data set. I also have this identify, de-identify toggle, which if REDCap sets this as a identifier and you toggle this back and forth, it will drop those columns. And there's other ways to that I won't get into. Um, But once you actually have the data loaded, I'm going to make sure de-identify is on. I'm going to show um, some of the sarcoma data here soon. And then once you've chosen your group, you can go to the group. I'll stick to the test project for now. And I'll show you the user if you already have a subset chosen. And now I just want to look, you choose a split, which you'll see what that means in a second. So let's say we want to split kind of the data set by birth sex. And we wanted to look at another variable. For now, we'll just look at birth sex and salutation. This is an example of a parallel category diagram. Let me switch it to everybody, all records. And so, oh, I don't like those colors. I want to let's shuffle these up. So let me move this out of the way. My Zoom keeps blocking me. If I wanted to shuffle the colors, this is what we mean when we say exploratory data analysis. You have this data set, it has 100 variables, 200 variables. You don't just want to look at two, you want to kind of play around a little bit. So that's what exploratory data analysis is. And so this is just because we stuck to these rules where we have this REDCapSync project object and we have functions that work towards it and everything points at REDCap. If you make a change in REDCap, it'll trickle down to these layers. If you don't want to call things birth sex anymore and you want to call it gender or switch the name or do something like that, and you want that to propagate all the way down to the plots that you're making, and you want to do an abstract where you just want to show the sarcoma group does all these projects, and I'm kind of the data person. They tell me what they want. We explore it. I take some screenshots and I export or I use these functions, and we generate, different abstracts all from the same data set. And if I wanted to do the same thing for a different research group, I said, what's your REDCap? Get me on there. What's the token? Get all the data, and I play with it here. So we're doing great on time. We have time for 5 minutes for questions and to go back to the slides and kind of wrap up. I'm looking at a chat here too. Nicole says, do you need to use REDCapSync in order to use RosyREDCap? Yes, in this case, because the REDCap sync creates this project object and it creates a cache. And then when RosyREDCap launches locally on your computer, that's another benefit. This Shiny app's just running on my computer. It's not being shared with anyone. It's not on Shiny, the website. It's just on my local desktop, which is good for research. So if the only things that I've been playing with, like you'll see there's a make table one. I've been playing with taking the RosyREDCap idea of just having a clean data frame and a split. Like this only takes a data frame that's like properly labeled in R, and then it makes a table one, which I didn't actually scroll down to that. This is also making a table one down here. And I was playing with the idea of adding different things. But to answer your question, I'm working on doing maybe some of the RosyREDCap stuff where the input object is maybe a clean data frame, which may or may not come from, for example, the survival curve. I use that even though it's in RosyREDCap, I think it just uses the clean data frame or it uses the project object. So the way I designed it is it uses the REDCapSync object, but I've been playing with different shortcuts to visualizing common things. But I'm trying to prevent myself from going from making one package to two to three. So that's why it's currently bundled in the RosyREDCap for that. Oh, I'm glad I have this up. This is a demonstration of all the different REDCap API packages that exist. A REDQuack is actually going to be presented here at this conference as well. I'm also very happy about this. There's a one called REDCap tidyR in the middle here. This one does something almost similar to what I'm doing, but it doesn't have the log feature. Like if you have a small enough REDCap, it gets everything for you and it's kind of organized, but then you still have to write functions towards it. But if you wanted to refresh the data, it's not going to only update two things. It's going to go back. So if you have a big REDCap or a medium-sized REDCap, I guess the extra 30 seconds you could either wait. I was also trying to I don't know if the REDCap API will ever be restricted by how much you can download at once, or that's kind of my paranoia, which why I don't want to like freak out that I'm taking all this data from REDCap. I just want these new records. I don't want to download the data set every single time I run the script. I think that's not a good thing for servers or institutions, which is why a couple of different of these are working on memory efficient ways of caching your data. But what makes REDCap sync completely different than all of these is I'm not trying to compete with these. I'm trying to use one or two of these to make a standardized object. And that's how I'm trying to set myself separately, which is why I decided with some mentorship with the Ray's REDCap group and people like Ray Belize and Philip Chase and Christian Bastion are in that group. And they told me, REDCapR already does that. So why don't you? So I found what makes my project unique, and I think that's also a good learning point for the people that are here. If there's any other questions, let me know, and I'll just wrap up with my last slide or two. I think it's here. You're welcome, Nicole. All right. So let me just wrap up here. So some takeaways that I wanted to emphasize before I did all my ramblings. I think having reflected on this, I think something that makes this unique is that I use the log and I can use individuals and do summaries. I think that's a unique feature. And then I showed you the Excel sheets and the visuals. I haven't seen too many. I've seen what the REDCap API can do, and if you know data, you know that's powerful. But if you don't connect that to communication and visuals and shiny apps and stuff, then people don't really know why you think it's so cool. Like, what's a big deal communicating with the REDCap API? But if you show them some of the things I'm showing you, the visual networks, the parallel categories, then you're going to get people's attention, and then you're going to say, I can generate that for your next project. And for those interested in the actual release of REDCap Sync, I'm trying to realistically have a CRAN submission by September and be done with it in 2025, by December, be approved, and then it'll be installed. If it never goes that far, I'm planning on keeping a working version in GitHub and you can keep installing it. Just remember what I said, I would refresh it. RosyREDCap is a maybe. I've seen some shiny apps like this published to CRAN, but they're so kind of niche that it might just stay on GitHub for now and be like a play project. But it could still always be installed like a regular project, which more and more people are doing. CRAN's really hard to submit to. That's a whole nother slide that I didn't put in here. The reminder for you guys that a couple of things I said, generalize your code, like separate it. If you're doing a lymphoma project or some epi study, try and pull out the common things and maybe work on turning that into functions and a package. Then you could use that for another project. Separate your concerns. So if all of your data is all bundled up, your model, view, controller, your stats, try and see if you can tease those things out, especially if you're making like reporting or like a pipeline. There's a reason we separate those things. Use the right tools, which I think I've emphasized. I mentioned that making a package, even if it doesn't go all the way through or no one uses it or someone else at Vanderbilt makes a better one, I still learned a lot and I'm really grateful to the community with R and REDCap. Um, I have a lot of acknowledgments. This is from Sarcoma, but also the people that have mentored me in coding, the Ray's group. Ray Belize taught me how to code when I was an MD MPH student, and then I've been working with R ever since. And then I'll leave. We have another 4 or 5 minutes for questions for those that want to know something specific. Thanks for the people that are going to watch this recorded. Thank you, Natalie, for all of your help. If I explained Natalie is a now working in Epi. She worked with me and has helped um, guide some of the project here. So thanks to her. I'll leave it on one slide that I think describes the project, maybe this one. And I'll leave it open for questions about either REDCap or any of the above here. Thank you. I'll check the chat too if there's anything there. Thank you all.
That was great and much more advanced than what anything I'm doing with REDCap. So it's nice to see what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I like to explain like the beginner, immediate, and advanced version of REDCap. I think it's here. I do not recommend people use the beginner version of REDCap where you do everything in the REDCap user interface. Like if you're going to make 300, variables or even 20 or 30, you can download the data dictionary and then edit that Excel file and then upload that back to REDCap. That's one
Hmm.
way to kind of bulk edit all the metadata. I think intermediate is still for a lot of people that don't code. They have REDCap has reports, and if you know how to follow the rules, or if it's a very simple REDCap without repeating stuff, then the data import and export tools are really useful. It's just they're coded, which is like a pet peeve of mine, um, and then advanced is the API stuff and connecting it to the medical record. And my goal was to kind of tie this all up and, someone who's beginner slash intermediate and they have an API token, maybe they can unleash some of their without having to learn all the API stuff that I learned about all the possible things you can get out of REDCap. And there's like 54 endpoints in the API.
Very cool.
All right. And my emails will be available you can just do the codingdocs@gmail.com or go to the website that I have. I'll go to the front here.
And are these slides on your website?
I can put them there. I can include it I'll find a way to link it. If not, I left a Google form on the main website. So if you want to be emailed specifically, like when I release the CRAN package or with these slides, there's a Google form. If you go to the main website here, there's just a Google form on the home page that you can click on and just put your email. And um, when I have like an end point where I'm like, hey, like I'm submitting this to CRAN, I'll email. But yeah, feel free. I'm totally comfortable with people. There's an email here too, a Gmail that's open and public. If you have a REDCap question about, your workflow and things, we'll see how many people email me, but hopefully that's not
Hopefully you won't regret that.
yeah. If not, I'll just delete that email. So thanks for sticking around, you guys. I really appreciate it. It's 4 years of work. So thanks.
Impressive. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.